Nothing drives engagement and commitment like knowing that your manager cares about you as a person. It's 1939, and Sergeant Major James Goldie Prentice was an officer in the Gordon Highlanders, a Scottish regiment of the British Army in World War II. He was on the island of Orkney in the extreme northern part of Scotland in the middle of winter with 36 men in his platoon in preparation for the battles soon to come in far-off Burma. They were about 5 miles from their base camp when suddenly a blizzard descended upon the island, and there was no way that they could safely get back to their camp 5 miles away. And so Sergeant Major Prentice was more than a little happy to see the dim lights of a farm oasis off in the distance. And so he went up to the farmhouse and he knocked on the door, and the farmer came down in his night clothes. It was dark already, and the sergeant major said, "Sir, could I prevail on you to let my men sleep in your barn for the night?" And the farmer said, "Yes, but only under one condition, and that is that all of you will come in and share a hot meal in our kitchen." Very small kitchen, small table, rough-hewn table that could accommodate only 6 people. He had 36 men. But 6 at a time, he graciously accepted their offer, and 6 at a time, Sergeant Major Jim Prentice ushered those men in, where they filled up on an inelegant feast of ground beef, turnips, potatoes, carrots, and pancakes. The kind of the Scottish version of the Denny's Grand Slam breakfast. Only when all 36 of those men had been fed did the sergeant major come and have a seat to see if there was anything left. And there was. The farmer's son, a 9-year-old boy, sitting in the back of the room, the corner of the kitchen, noticed this with some curiosity, and he came over to the sergeant major and he said, "Why did you go last? You're the leader." And the sergeant major looked at him with conviction and instruction in his voice, and he said, "Lad, first you feed the troops. They're nae use hungry. First you feed the troops. They're no use hungry." 40 years later, Jim Prentice found himself once again on the island of Orkney, this time not as a soldier, but as a tourist, with his wife and his grown daughter, who is now my wife. And as my wife and her mother went off to view the remains of an ancient Viking burial ground, Jim went for what he would have called a wee donner, a short walk. He was looking for a pub, if you want to know. And he came upon ground that bore a strange air of familiarity. And he knew he was there on the same farm. And about that time, a man in his late 40s came walking across the farm, and they greeted each other. And Jim said, "You won't believe it, I was here 40 years ago on this very farm, and a snowstorm came, and I took my men, and I knocked on the door, and the farmer came down, and the man said, 'First you feed the troops.'" And he looked at him and he said, "Oh, you're no the wee boy." He said, "Aye." He said, "I took over the management of this farm in my 20s, and I've always remembered that night, primarily because we had nothing for breakfast the next morning, but also because of what that sergeant major told me, first you feed the troops." He said, "I've always tried to remember that and feed the troops first, even when there wasn't a lot to feed them. And it's helped our farm to grow." I'm all right. Okay. First you feed the troops.